The gunshots echoed through the canyon, spurring Penelope Gardner to run faster, her sister's hand clutched tightly in her own. Sweat dripped down her face as the afternoon sun beat mercilessly against her back, her chest burning with each desperate breath as they fled deeper into the wilderness of New Mexico Territory, 1885. "Faster, Abigail!" Penelope gasped, pulling her younger sister behind a large boulder as more shots rang out. "They're still coming." 18-year-old Abigail stumbled, her face pale with fear and exhaustion. "Penny, I can't keep going," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My ankle, I think I twisted it back at the creek." Penelope, 22 and fiercely protective, peered around the edge of the boulder. The dust cloud in the distance confirmed her worst fears. Jonathan Wade and his gang were still pursuing them. The outlaws who had murdered their father just days ago for the money he'd been carrying from the sale of their small ranch outside Santa Fe. "We have to keep moving," Penelope insisted, helping Abigail to her feet. "Red River can't be more than a few miles ahead. We can find the sheriff there." They pushed forward through the scrubby terrain, Abigail leaning heavily against her sister. The red dirt kicked up with each labored step, coating their already filthy dresses. Penelope's dark hair had come loose from its pins, whipping around her face as she scanned the horizon for any sign of safety. The sun was beginning to set when Abigail collapsed. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I just can't." Penelope knelt beside her sister, terror coursing through her veins. They were exposed here, with minimal cover and nowhere to hide. She could hear distant hoofbeats growing louder. "There!" Abigail suddenly whispered, pointing to their left. Penelope followed her gaze to see a small cabin nestled against the hillside, nearly invisible among the rocks and sparse trees. Smoke curled from the chimney. Someone was home. "It's our only chance," Penelope decided, helping Abigail to her feet once more. "Come on." They had barely made it halfway to the cabin when the door swung open. A tall figure stepped out, rifle in hand. Penelope froze, wondering if they'd just traded one danger for another. "Get inside," the man called out, his voice low and urgent. "Now!" Something in his tone convinced Penelope to trust him. With renewed strength, she half-carried Abigail the remaining distance. As they reached the porch, Penelope got her first good look at their potential savior. He stood over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes, a startling blue, were alert and concerned as he glanced past them toward the approaching riders. "I'm Rylan Ingram," he said quickly, ushering them inside, "and you ladies are in a heap of trouble." The cabin was sparsely furnished but neat, with a small fire crackling in the hearth. Penelope helped Abigail to a chair, while Rylan secured the door. "Wade's gang," Penelope explained breathlessly. "They're after us. They killed our father 3 days ago." Rylan's expression darkened. "Jonathan Wade?" Penelope nodded, surprised. "You know him?" "We've crossed paths." His jaw tightened as he moved to the window, carefully peering out. "They're coming up from the south, 5 riders." Abigail whimpered, and Penelope squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "Please," Penelope said, meeting Rylan's gaze directly. "We have nowhere else to go." Rylan studied them for a long moment before nodding once. "There's a cellar under the floorboards," he said, moving to the center of the room and pulling back a rug to reveal a trapdoor. "Get in there and stay quiet, no matter what you hear." Penelope helped Abigail down the narrow ladder into the darkness below. The space was small, smelling of earth and stored vegetables. Rylan handed down a lantern. "Don't light it unless absolutely necessary," he warned. "I'll try to send them on their way, but if things go bad—" He hesitated, then passed Penelope a small revolver. "Last resort." Their eyes met briefly in the dim light. Penelope saw concern there, but also determination. "Thank you," she whispered. Rylan nodded grimly. "Just stay quiet." He closed the trapdoor and replaced the rug. In the darkness, Penelope held her sister close, listening to Rylan's footsteps moving around the cabin above. Minutes later, they heard the thunder of hooves approaching, followed by rough voices calling out, "You there, in the cabin." "Something I can help you with?" Rylan's voice replied, sounding casual but carrying a hard edge that Penelope hadn't heard before. Looking for two women, a gravelly voice responded. Sisters, might have passed this way. Haven't seen any women in these parts for weeks, Rylan answered. Just me and my horses. Penelope held her breath, her heart hammering so loudly she feared the men might hear it through the floorboards. Mind if we take a look around? I mind plenty, Rylan said coldly. This is private property. We ain't asking permission, cowboy. Tension crackled in the silence that followed. Penelope gripped the revolver tighter. 5 against 1, Rylan finally said. Those aren't great odds for me, but I guarantee I'll take at least 3 of you down before you get me. Starting with you, Wade. Abigail's fingers dug into Penelope's arm. You know me? Wade asked, sounding surprised. I know you robbed the bank in Taos last month. I know there's a bounty on your head that would set me up nicely. And I know you're not getting into my cabin. The silence stretched for what seemed an eternity. Listen, cowboy, Wade finally said, his tone shifting to something almost friendly. I got no quarrel with you. Those women stole something valuable from me. Family heirloom. I'm just looking to get it back. Like I said, haven't seen any women, Rylan replied steadily. But if I do, I'll be sure to point them toward the nearest sheriff, not toward thieves and murderers. Another tense silence followed. We're wasting time here, another voice muttered. They probably headed for Red River. The man says he hasn't seen them, Wade finally conceded. Let's ride on. Penelope could hardly believe they were giving up so easily. She strained to hear what was happening above. One more thing, Wade added. If I find out you're lying to me, I'll be back, and I won't be nearly so polite next time. Noted, Rylan replied coolly. The hoofbeats gradually receded into the distance. Still, Penelope and Abigail remained frozen in place, afraid to make even the slightest sound. Several minutes passed before the trapdoor opened, revealing Rylan's face. They've gone, he said, extending a hand to help them up. For now. Penelope climbed out first, then helped Abigail, who winced as she put weight on her injured ankle. Your sister needs to stay off that foot, Rylan observed, kneeling to examine Abigail's ankle with gentle hands. It's swollen, but I don't think it's broken. Thank you, Penelope said, watching him work. You risked your life for us, complete strangers. Rylan glanced up, a hint of a smile touching his lips for the first time. I've got no love for Wade and his kind, and I wasn't about to leave 2 women to fend for themselves. He stood, moving to a cabinet where he retrieved bandages. I'm guessing you're the Gardner sisters? News travels fast in these parts. Heard about what happened to your father. I'm sorry. Penelope swallowed hard against the grief that threatened to overwhelm her. Yes, I'm Penelope. This is my sister, Abigail. Pleased to meet you both, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Rylan wrapped Abigail's ankle with practiced efficiency. You're welcome to stay here until it's safe. Wade and his men will likely keep searching for a while, but they'll eventually move on. We can impose, Penelope began. You can and you will, Rylan interrupted firmly. That ankle needs rest, and those men are still out there. Besides, I could use the company. His smile was warmer this time, and Penelope felt something flutter in her chest despite the dire circumstances. Now, Rylan continued, moving to the stove, when's the last time you ladies ate? As night fell fully, Penelope sat at Rylan's small table, watching him serve a simple but hearty stew. Abigail was already half asleep in the cabin's only chair, her injured foot propped up on a stool. It's not fancy, Rylan apologized, placing a bowl before Penelope. But it's filling. After 3 days of running on little more than hope and fear, this looks like a feast, Penelope assured him, inhaling the savory aroma. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. Penelope couldn't help studying Rylan when he wasn't looking. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 26 or 27, and beneath his rugged exterior was a handsome face that occasionally softened when he smiled. How long have you lived out here alone? She finally asked. Going on 3 years, Rylan replied, breaking off a piece of cornbread. I came west after the war, worked cattle drives for a while, then saved enough to buy this place. The war? Penelope calculated quickly. You must have been very young. A shadow crossed his face. 17 when I enlisted, too young to understand what I was getting into. Penelope nodded, sensing he didn't wish to elaborate. Our father brought us west when I was 16. Mother had died, and he thought a fresh start would do us good. And now, Wade's taken that from you too, Rylan said quietly. Father was carrying all the money from the sale of our ranch, Penelope explained, the words bitter in her mouth. We were moving to Denver. He thought we'd have better prospects there. She paused, fighting back tears. Wade killed him for that money, and now he's after us because we can identify him. You saw it happen? Penelope nodded grimly. We were waiting in the hotel while Father finalized the sale. When he didn't return, we went looking for him. Found him in an alley. She couldn't continue. Rylan reached across the table, hesitantly covering her hand with his own. His calloused palm was warm and somehow comforting. I'm sorry, he said simply. For a moment, they sat connected by that simple touch, an unexpected lifeline in the chaos their lives had become. Finally, Penelope withdrew her hand, suddenly self-conscious. You mentioned you've crossed paths with Wade before? Rylan's expression hardened. He and his gang rustled cattle from a ranch I was working a few years back. Killed 2 good men in the process. He stood, collecting their empty bowls. Wade's built quite a reputation since then. Robberies, extortion, murder. The law hasn't been able to catch him. And now he's after us, Penelope murmured, glancing at her sleeping sister. You'll be safe here, Rylan assured her. This place is hard to find if you don't know it's here, and I'm a light sleeper. He nodded toward the rifle propped by the door. Penelope wanted to believe him, but fear had been her constant companion for days now. What if they come back? Then we'll deal with it, Rylan said firmly. But for tonight, you need rest. You can take my bed. I'll sleep out here. Penelope started to protest, but exhaustion was overtaking her. When Rylan insisted, she finally accepted, helping him carry Abigail to the small bedroom. As she settled beside her sister on the narrow bed, Penelope was acutely aware of Rylan moving around in the main room, banking the fire for the night. Thank you, she called softly through the open door, for everything. There was a pause before he answered. Get some sleep, Miss Gardner. Tomorrow will be here soon enough. Despite her fears and the strange surroundings, Penelope fell into the deepest sleep she'd had in days, comforted by the knowledge that someone was standing watch over them. Dawn broke with golden light filtering through the cabin's small windows. Penelope woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. The events of the previous day came rushing back, and she sat up quickly, checking on Abigail, who still slept soundly beside her. The smell of coffee drew her into the main room, where she found Rylan already awake, cooking something over the stove. Good morning, he said, glancing up with a smile that transformed his serious face. Hope you slept well. Better than I expected, Penelope admitted, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance. She ran a hand through her tangled hair, wishing for a proper brush and clean clothes. As if reading her thoughts, Rylan gestured to a bucket of water he'd placed near the hearth. Thought you might want to wash up, and I found some clothes that might do for now. They belong to my sister. You have a sister? Penelope asked, surprised. A fleeting sadness crossed Rylan's face. Had. Sarah died of scarlet fever 3 years ago. I'm sorry, Penelope said softly. Rylan shrugged, turning back to the stove. Life out here is hard. You learn to keep going. He nodded toward a small trunk in the corner. Her things are in there. Help yourself. Grateful for his thoughtfulness, Penelope found a simple blue dress that would do once she'd made a few adjustments. After checking on Abigail, who was still sleeping, she used the water to wash as best she could, then changed into the borrowed clothes behind a blanket Rylan had hung for privacy. When she emerged, Rylan had breakfast waiting eggs and bacon with fresh coffee. You're quite the host, Mr. Ingram, she remarked, accepting the plate he offered. Just Rylan, please, he said, pouring her coffee. And it's not often I get to cook for anyone but myself. Though I should probably see to my chores soon. The horses need tending. Penelope hesitated. Would you mind if I came with you? I'd like some fresh air, and I'm quite good with horses. Rylan studied her for a moment, then nodded. The company would be welcome. After leaving a note for Abigail, they stepped outside into the cool morning air. The cabin, Penelope now saw, was nestled in a small valley surrounded by rocky hills, with a stream running nearby. A modest corral held 3 horses, and a small barn stood to one side. "This is beautiful," she breathed, taking in the landscape bathed in morning light. "It's not much," Rylan said, leading the way to the barn, "but it's mine, paid for it fair and square." "What do you do out here?" Penelope asked, following him inside, where the sweet smell of hay mingled with the earthier scent of horses. "Mostly break horses for the larger ranches," Rylan explained, grabbing a pitchfork. "I have a way with them. And I hunt, trap a little in winter. It's enough." As they worked together, feeding the horses and mucking out stalls, Penelope found herself drawn to the quiet competence Rylan displayed in everything he did. Unlike some men she'd known, who felt compelled to boast about their abilities, Rylan simply did what needed doing, efficiently and without complaint. "You're good with horses," he commented when she expertly calmed a skittish mare. "Father taught us both," Penelope replied, stroking the horse's neck. "Said it was important for women to be self-sufficient out west." "Wise man," Rylan agreed. "Too many folks come west unprepared for what they'll face." They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side. Penelope found herself relaxing for the first time in days, almost able to forget the danger that had driven them to this place. "Were you planning to stay in Denver?" Rylan asked as they finished the morning chores. "That was Father's plan," Penelope said. "He thought Abigail might find better marriage prospects there, and I might find work as a teacher." She sighed, leaning against the corral fence. "Now, I don't know what we'll do. The money's gone. We have nothing." "You have each other," Rylan pointed out. "That's more than some." Penelope glanced at him, noting the hint of loneliness in his voice. "You've been out here alone a long time." He shrugged. "By choice, mostly. After the war, it was hard to be around people. Too much noise. Too many questions." "And now?" Penelope asked softly. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. But before Rylan could answer, a shout from the cabin broke the moment. "Penny!" Abigail's voice called urgently. They rushed back to find Abigail standing awkwardly by the window, her weight off her injured ankle. "Riders coming," she said, pointing. "3 of them." Rylan moved swiftly to the window, Penelope right behind him. Her heart sank when she spotted the dust cloud approaching from the east. "Get back to the cellar," Rylan ordered, reaching for his rifle. "Both of you." "Is it Wade?" Penelope asked, fear tightening her throat. Rylan squinted against the sun. "Can't tell yet, but we're not taking chances." He helped Abigail down into the cellar first, then turned to Penelope, who hesitated at the opening. "Be careful," she said, impulsively grabbing his hand. "Please." For a brief moment, his fingers tightened around hers. "I will. Now go." The cellar seemed even smaller and more confining than it had the previous day. Penelope held Abigail close in the darkness, listening intently to the sounds above. The riders approached slowly. Penelope could hear the creak of saddle leather as they dismounted, followed by boots on the porch. "Ingram, you in there?" a man's voice called out. "Sheriff Davis?" Rylan's voice replied, sounding surprised. "What brings you all the way out here?" Relief flooded Penelope. Not Wade and his men, but the law. "Looking for the Gardner girls," the sheriff replied. "Word is their father was murdered over in Santa Fe. They're missing, possibly in danger." "And how would I know anything about that?" Rylan asked, his tone neutral. "Because Jonathan Wade and his boys were seen heading this direction yesterday, and then suddenly changed course. Made me wonder what might have sent them off their trail." There was a long pause before Rylan spoke again. "You'd better come inside, Sheriff." Footsteps crossed the floor above, then the trap door opened. Rylan's face appeared, backlit by the cabin's interior. "It's safe," he said, extending a hand to help them up. "Sheriff Davis from Red River is here, and he's brought help." Penelope emerged from the cellar to find 3 men standing in Rylan's cabin. The oldest, a grizzled man with a silver mustache and a tin star pinned to his vest, stepped forward. "Miss Gardner, I'm Sheriff Davis. We've been searching for you and your sister since word came about your father." His eyes were kind beneath bushy brows. "I'm mighty relieved to find you safe." "Thank you, Sheriff," Penelope said, helping Abigail to a chair. "Mr. Ingram saved our lives yesterday." The sheriff nodded, giving Rylan an appraising look. "So I gather. Good thing, too. Wade's a dangerous man." "Do you know where he is now?" Rylan asked. Last seen heading toward Cimarron, one of the deputies volunteered. But that was yesterday afternoon, which means they could be anywhere by now, the sheriff concluded grimly. Miss Gardner, I need to ask you some questions about what happened to your father. For the next hour, Penelope recounted everything finding their father's body, overhearing Wade's men in the saloon discussing the murder, their desperate flight when the outlaws realized they had witnesses. We have enough to put Wade away for good, Sheriff Davis said when she finished. But first, we have to catch him. What happens to us now? Abigail asked in a small voice. The sheriff scratched his chin thoughtfully. Well, you're welcome in Red River, of course, but truth be told, it might not be safe. Wade has friends in town, informants. If he knows you're there, they can stay here, Rylan said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. This place is isolated, hard to find, he continued, and I can protect them while the ankle heals. Sheriff Davis studied him for a long moment. That's a kind offer, Ingram, but it puts you at risk too. I can handle myself, Rylan said evenly. And Wade already knows I'm no friend of his. The sheriff glanced between Rylan and Penelope, something knowing in his gaze. Miss Gardner, your thoughts? Penelope looked at Rylan, surprised by his offer and the warmth it kindled within her. We would be very grateful for Mr. Ingram's continued hospitality, she said carefully. At least until Abigail can travel safely. Then it's settled, the sheriff declared. I'll send one of my deputies out every few days to check on you, and we'll keep hunting Wade. He turned to Rylan. You need anything from town? Some extra supplies wouldn't hurt, Rylan admitted, and perhaps some clothing for the ladies. Plans were made quickly. The sheriff would return the following day with provisions and news of the search for Wade. In the meantime, Rylan would keep the sisters hidden at his cabin. As the lawmen prepared to leave, Penelope stepped outside with the sheriff while Rylan helped his deputies load their horses. Sheriff, she said quietly, I want to thank you for your help. Just doing my job, Miss Gardner, he replied kindly. Can I ask you about Mr. Ingram? Penelope ventured. He's been nothing but generous, but I know so little about him. The sheriff's weathered face softened. Rylan's a good man. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's always been fair in his dealings. Served with distinction in the war, though he doesn't talk about it. He paused, glancing toward where Rylan stood with the deputies. Lost his family farm in Tennessee after the fighting. His parents died during the war, and then his sister a few years later. He's been on his own a long time. He mentioned his sister, Penelope said softly. It seems we have loss in common. Indeed you do, the sheriff agreed. Perhaps that's why he's opened his home to you. Rylan doesn't usually welcome company. After the lawmen departed, an awkward silence fell over the cabin. Abigail had dozed off again, exhausted by the morning's excitement, leaving Penelope and Rylan alone. I should thank you, Penelope said finally, for offering to let us stay. Rylan looked almost embarrassed. It makes sense, until your sister can travel safely. Still, it's an imposition, and potentially dangerous for you. He shrugged. I'm not worried about Wade. Perhaps you should be, Penelope said, concerned. He doesn't strike me as a man who forgives easily. Neither am I, Rylan replied, his voice hardening. Then, seeing her expression, he softened. I'm sorry about your father, Penelope. No one should have to witness what you did. The use of her given name surprised her. Penny, she corrected automatically. Most people call me Penny. Penny, he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. It suits you. Their eyes met again, and Penelope felt that same strange connection from earlier. There was something about Rylan Ingram that drew her in a quiet strength, a steadiness she found herself leaning toward like a flower seeking sunlight. The moment was broken by Abigail stirring awake. Did the sheriff leave? She asked groggily. Yes, Penelope replied, moving to check her sister's ankle. But he'll be back tomorrow with supplies. He thinks we should stay here until you're healed and Wade is caught. Abigail glanced between Penelope and Rylan, a knowing look in her eyes despite her youth. I think that's a wonderful idea, she said, with the faintest hint of a smile. The rest of the day passed in domestic tranquility that felt surprisingly natural. Rylan showed Penelope around the property, pointing out the stream where they could wash clothes and the small garden where he grew vegetables. They worked together to prepare dinner, and in the evening, Rylan produced a battered checkerboard for entertainment. As night fell, Penelope again tried to insist that Rylan take his bed back, but he was adamant. "I've slept on worse than my own floor," he assured her. "You ladies take the bedroom." Later, as Penelope lay beside her sleeping sister, she found herself reflecting on the strange turn their lives had taken. Just days ago, they had been planning a new life in Denver. Now their father was dead. They were fugitives from dangerous outlaws, and they were dependent on the kindness of a solitary cowboy with sad eyes and gentle hands. Yet, despite everything, Penelope felt a peculiar sense of peace. There was something about Rylan's cabin, about Rylan himself, that felt right in a way she couldn't explain. As she drifted toward sleep, she realized that for the first time since her father's murder, she was thinking about tomorrow with something other than dread. The days began to blend together as Abigail's ankles slowly healed. Sheriff Davis visited twice, bringing supplies and news that Wade's gang had been spotted near the Colorado border. The danger wasn't past, but it seemed to recede somewhat with each passing day. Penelope and Rylan fell into an easy routine. Mornings were spent with chores, feeding the horses, tending the garden, preparing meals. Afternoons often found them sitting with Abigail on the small porch Rylan had built, trading stories and gradually learning each other's histories. Penelope discovered that Rylan had a quiet wit that emerged when he was comfortable, and a depth of knowledge that surprised her. He'd been educated before the war, and had a small collection of well-worn books that he treasured. "My mother was a teacher," he explained when Penelope commented on his library. "She believed learning was the most important thing in life." "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Penelope said, examining a volume of Thoreau. "She was," Rylan agreed, a fond smile softening his features. "She would have liked you." The comment, casual as it was, sent a flush of pleasure through Penelope. She found herself increasingly aware of Rylan, the breadth of his shoulders when he chopped wood, the grace with which he handled the horses, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Abigail noticed, of course. One afternoon, while Rylan was out hunting, she broached the subject. "You like him?" she stated matter-of-factly, stitching a tear in one of the dresses Sheriff Davis had brought. "He's been very kind to us," Penelope replied, deliberately misunderstanding. Abigail gave her a knowing look. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." Penelope sighed, setting aside the beans she was sorting. "It doesn't matter. Once you're well enough to travel, we'll move on. We have to rebuild our lives." "Why can't we rebuild them here?" Abigail asked innocently. "Red River seems nice enough, and it's not as if we have anywhere specific to go now. Abby, we can't impose on Mr. Ingram indefinitely." "I think he likes having us here," Abigail argued. "Having you here especially." "Don't be silly," Penelope chided, though her heart quickened at the thought. "I'm not being silly. I see how he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching." Before Penelope could respond, the door opened and Rylan entered, a brace of rabbits in hand. "Dinner," he announced triumphantly. That evening, as they ate the rabbit stew Penelope had prepared, a comfortable silence enveloped them. Abigail had gone to bed early, leaving Penelope and Rylan alone by the fire. "I should check the horses once more before turning in," Rylan said, rising from his chair. "I'll come with you," Penelope offered impulsively. When he looked surprised, she added, "I could use some fresh air." The night was clear, stars scattered across the velvet sky like diamond dust. Lantern light spilled from the barn as Rylan checked each horse, murmuring softly to them while Penelope watched. "You're good with them," she observed. "They trust you." "Animals know when you respect them," Rylan replied, stroking the nose of the mare Penelope had calmed on her first day. "They can sense your intentions." "And people?" Penelope asked quietly. "Can you sense their intentions too?" Rylan turned to face her, the lantern light casting shadows across his features. "Sometimes, not always." He paused, studying her. "I knew I could trust you, though, from the moment I saw you running toward my cabin." "How?" He stepped closer, close enough that Penelope could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. "Something in your face, determination, courage. You weren't just running away from something. You were running toward safety for your sister." Penelope was acutely aware of his proximity, of the warmth radiating from him in the cool night air. "I was terrified," she admitted. That's what makes it courage, Rylan said softly. Being afraid and doing what needs doing anyway. She wasn't sure who moved first. Perhaps they both did, drawn together like magnets finding their opposite pole. His lips met hers gently, tentatively, as if asking a question. Penelope answered by stepping closer, her hands coming to rest lightly on his chest. The kiss deepened, awakening feelings that Penelope had thought buried beneath grief and fear. For a moment, there was no danger, no uncertain future, only Rylan's strong arms around her and the stars overhead. When they finally broke apart, Rylan rested his forehead against hers, his breath coming quick. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I shouldn't have presumed—" "Don't apologize," Penelope interrupted, her hand coming up to touch his face. "Please." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's embrace, neither willing to break the spell. Finally, Rylan stepped back slightly, though he kept hold of her hands. "Penny," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I know this is sudden. We've only known each other a short time, but A gunshot shattered the night, the bullet splintering wood just inches from Rylan's head." Penelope screamed as Rylan shoved her to the ground, covering her with his body as more shots rang out. "Wade," Rylan growled, dragging her behind a water trough. "Stay down!" He reached for his own gun, only to realize he'd left it in the cabin. Cursing under his breath, he peered over the trough, trying to locate their attackers in the darkness. "Ingram!" Jonathan Wade's voice called out from the shadows. "Send out the Gardner girls, and maybe I'll let you live." "Go to hell, Wade!" Rylan shouted back, his arm still protective around Penelope. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Penelope could hear men moving through the darkness, surrounding the barn. "We have to get to the cabin," Rylan whispered urgently. "Abigail's there alone." Penelope's blood ran cold at the thought of her sister, defenseless. "How?" "When I give the signal, run for the back door," Rylan instructed. "I'll create a distraction." "What about you?" Penelope asked, gripping his arm. "I'll be right behind you," he promised, though something in his tone made her doubt him. Before she could argue, Rylan grabbed a lantern and hurled it toward the far side of the corral. It shattered in a burst of flames, instantly drawing gunfire. "Now!" he hissed, pushing Penelope toward the barn's rear exit. She ran, heart pounding, expecting at any moment to feel a bullet tear through her. Behind her, she heard Rylan shouting, drawing attention away from her flight. Miraculously, she reached the cabin unseen. She burst through the door to find Abigail wide-eyed with terror, clutching Rylan's spare revolver. "Wade's here!" Penelope gasped, securing the door. "We need to hide." "Where's Rylan?" Abigail asked, struggling to her feet. Penelope's answer was cut off by another volley of gunfire, closer this time. Through the window, she could see flames spreading from the lantern Rylan had thrown. The outlaws were using the light to close in on the barn. "We have to help him," Penelope decided, grabbing the rifle Rylan kept by the door. "He's trapped in the barn." "Penny, you can't go out there," Abigail protested. "I won't leave him," Penelope said firmly. "Get to the cellar. Stay hidden no matter what happens." Before her sister could stop her, Penelope slipped back outside, keeping to the shadows as she circled toward the barn. She could see Wade and two of his men advancing, weapons drawn, while two others moved to flank the building. Penelope's hands shook as she raised the rifle. She had fired guns before her father had insisted both his daughters know how to protect themselves, but never at another human being. Taking a steadying breath, she aimed at the nearest outlaw and squeezed the trigger. The man cried out, clutching his shoulder as he fell. Instantly, the others turned toward the source of the shot, giving Rylan the opening he needed to dash from the barn. But Wade was quicker than Penelope anticipated. He pivoted, firing almost casually at Rylan's running figure. Penelope watched in horror as Rylan stumbled, then fell. "No!" The scream tore from her throat before she could stop it. Wade's head snapped in her direction. "Well, well," he drawled, stepping toward her hiding place. "One of the Gardner girls, come to save her Cowboy." Penelope fired again, but in her panic, the shot went wide. Before she could chamber another round, rough hands grabbed her from behind. One of Wade's men had circled around while she was focused on Rylan. "Got her, boss!" the man called, twisting Penelope's arm painfully behind her back. Wade approached, a cruel smile spreading across his weathered face. He was tall and lean, with cold eyes and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. "Miss Gardner," he said with mock politeness, "I've been looking all over for you." "You murdered my father," Penelope spat, struggling against her captor. "Business is business," Wade shrugged. "And now you've gone and killed one of my men. That makes us even more personally acquainted." "I didn't kill him," Penelope retorted, glancing at the fallen outlaw who was still moving, groaning in pain. "Close enough." Wade looked past her toward the cabin. "Now, where's that sister of yours? I'd hate to burn down this nice little homestead to smoke her out." "Leave her alone," Penelope warned, her voice steadier than she felt. "The sheriff knows everything. Killing us won't save you." Wade laughed. "Maybe not, but it'll be satisfying." He gestured to the man holding Penelope. "Bring her to the cabin. We'll see if little sister comes out to save her." As they dragged her forward, Penelope's gaze swept desperately toward where Rylan had fallen. To her immense relief, she saw movement. He was alive, though clearly wounded. Their eyes met briefly across the distance. She saw determination there, and something else that made her heart constrict. Wade kicked open the cabin door. Come out, wherever you are," he called mockingly. Silence answered him. Penelope prayed Abigail had made it to the cellar and would stay hidden. "Search the place," Wade ordered his remaining men. As they began tearing through the cabin, overturning furniture and smashing Rylan's few possessions, Penelope was struck by a terrible thought. The rug covering the cellar door had been moved when she left. Would Wade notice? She had to create a distraction. With a sudden, violent motion, she stomped on her captor's foot and twisted free of his grasp. She made it 3 steps before Wade's hand closed around her throat, slamming her against the wall. "You've got spirit," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "I like that. Makes it more fun when it breaks." A gunshot exploded in the confined space of the cabin. Wade's eyes widened in surprise, then glazed over as he collapsed, a bloom of red spreading across his chest. Behind him stood Rylan, blood soaking his left sleeve, Penelope's discarded rifle in his hands. The outlaw who had been holding Penelope reached for his gun, but a second shot from the doorway dropped him. Sheriff Davis stepped inside, his deputy right behind him. "Sorry we're late, Miss Gardner," the sheriff said grimly, surveying the scene. "Ran into a couple of Wade's lookouts on the trail." Penelope hardly heard him. She rushed to Rylan, who had slumped against the doorframe, his face pale with blood loss. "You're hurt!" she cried, examining the wound in his shoulder. "Worth it," he managed, his eyes never leaving her face. "You're safe." "Abigail," Penelope remembered suddenly. She moved to the trap door, calling for her sister. Moments later, Abigail emerged, tearful but unharmed. What followed was a blur of activity. The sheriff's men secured the surviving outlaws, while Penelope and Abigail tended to Rylan's wound. The bullet had passed clean through his shoulder, painful, but not life-threatening with proper care. "You saved my life," Penelope told him, as she bandaged his shoulder. Rylan's hand came up to cup her cheek. "You saved mine first," he reminded her. "Running out there with my rifle. Bravest thing I've ever seen." Sheriff Davis interrupted them, his expression grave. "Wade's dead," he announced. "So's one of his men. The others are in custody." "It's over then," Abigail said, relief evident in her voice. "It's over," the sheriff confirmed. "You ladies are safe now, free to go wherever you please." Rylan's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on Penelope's, then relaxed as if he'd caught himself. "You'll be wanting to continue to Denver, I expect," he said carefully, his tone neutral. Penelope looked at him, at the home he had shared with them, at the life he had risked to protect them. In that moment, the decision that had been forming in her heart crystallized into certainty. "Actually," she said slowly, "I think we might prefer to stay in New Mexico territory." Her eyes met Rylan's, conveying all the words she wasn't yet brave enough to say aloud. "If we're welcome." The hope that blazed to life in Rylan's eyes was answer enough. The weeks that followed were a time of healing and rebuilding. Rylan's shoulder mended slowly, requiring Penelope's daily care, a duty she embraced with tender diligence. Abigail's ankle strengthened enough for her to move around the cabin freely, and soon she was helping with chores, her natural cheerfulness returning. Word of Wade's death spread quickly through the territory. The remaining members of his gang were tried and sentenced in Santa Fe, bringing a formal end to the ordeal that had claimed James Gardner's life. Sheriff Davis became a regular visitor, bringing supplies and news from town. It was during one such visit, a month after Wade's death, that he brought a letter that changed everything again. "It's from Santa Fe," he explained, handing the envelope to Penelope. "Something about your father's estate." Penelope opened it with trembling hands, Rylan and Abigail watching anxiously. As she read, her expression shifted from confusion to astonishment. "What is it?" Abigail asked, unable to contain her curiosity. "It's from Father's lawyer," Penelope explained, looking up from the paper. Apparently, Father had deposited a substantial sum in the Santa Fe bank before he was killed, money from the ranch sale that Wade didn't get. She paused, still processing the news. "It's ours. Enough to start over wherever we choose." The cabin fell silent as the implications sank in. Penelope found herself looking at Rylan, whose expression had grown carefully neutral again, as if preparing himself for another goodbye. "Well," Sheriff Davis said, breaking the silence, "that's mighty good news. You ladies can have your fresh start after all." Later that evening, after the sheriff had departed and Abigail had gone to bed, Penelope found Rylan on the porch, staring out at the stars. She joined him, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. "Beautiful night?" she said softly. Rylan nodded, his profile illuminated by moonlight. "It is." Penelope took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about the money." "You'll be able to go to Denver now," Rylan said, his voice carefully controlled. "Start the life your father wanted for you." "Is that what you think I want?" Penelope asked, turning to face him. Rylan met her gaze, uncertainty in his eyes. "Isn't it? A proper life in a city. Teaching position for you. Good marriage prospects for Abigail." "Once, perhaps," Penelope admitted. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "But people change. Circumstances change. I've discovered there are more important things than city comforts." Hope flickered across Rylan's face, but he hesitated. "Penny, I don't want you staying out of obligation or gratitude. This life, it's hard, isolated. Not what a woman like you deserves." "A woman like me?" Penelope repeated, raising an eyebrow. "And what sort of woman am I, Rylan Ingram? Educated, refined, beautiful." He swallowed hard. "You could have any life you wanted." "Exactly," Penelope agreed. "Any life I want." She stepped closer, placing her free hand against his chest. "And I want this one. Here, with you." The admission hung between them in the cool night air. "Are you certain?" Rylan asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Because if you stay, Penny, if you stay, I don't think I could bear to watch you leave again." In answer, Penelope rose on tiptoe and kissed him, pouring all her newfound certainty into the gesture. Rylan's arms came around her, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. When they finally broke apart, Rylan rested his forehead against hers, his breathing uneven. "I never expected to find you," he confessed. "After the war, after losing everyone, I thought I was meant to be alone." "So did I," Penelope whispered. "After Mother died, I focused so completely on taking care of Father and Abigail that I never imagined having a life of my own. But then, you opened your door to us." "Best decision I ever made," Rylan murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Abigail approves, by the way," Penelope added with a small smile. "She told me this morning that she thinks you're quite handsome for an old cowboy." Rylan laughed, the sound warming Penelope's heart. "Old, am I?" "Practically ancient," Penelope teased. 27 is positively decrepit." He grew serious again, taking both her hands in his. "Penny, I'm not a wealthy man. This cabin, these few acres, it's all I have. But everything I am, everything I have, is yours if you want it." "It's more than enough," Penelope assured him. "We can use Father's money to expand the property, perhaps buy more horses. You could train them, and I could teach in Red River." "You've thought this through," Rylan observed, surprised. "Thoroughly," Penelope confirmed. "Abigail, too. She's already planning to plant a bigger garden come spring." Rylan's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I love you, Penelope Gardner," he said simply. "Have since the moment you came running up to my door, fierce as a mother bear protecting her cub." "And I love you, Rylan Ingram," Penelope replied, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Though I didn't realize it until you were willing to die to keep us safe." He kissed her again, sealing their declaration under the vast New Mexico sky. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Penelope Gardner became Penelope Ingram in a small ceremony in Red River's newly built church. Sheriff Davis gave her away, and Abigail served as her only attendant, beaming with approval as her sister and the cowboy, who had saved them, exchanged the vows. The money from their father's estate had indeed allowed them to expand Rylan's property. They purchased adjoining land and more horses, laying the foundation for what would become one of the most respected horse breeding operations in the territory. Penelope secured a position teaching at Red River's school 3 days a week, while Abigail, now fully recovered, discovered a talent for bookkeeping and handled the financial side of their growing business. As winter settled over the land, bringing short days and long, cozy evenings by the fire, Penelope often reflected on the strange path that had led her to this life. The tragedy of her father's murder would always be a painful memory, but from that darkness had come unexpected light, a love she had never sought but now couldn't imagine living without. One snowy evening, as they sat together watching the flames dance in the hearth, Rylan's arm warm around her shoulders, Penelope shared news that would change their lives once more. "I went to see Doc Williams in town today," she said, a secret smile playing at her lips. Rylan straightened, concern crossing his features. "Are you unwell?" "Quite the opposite," Penelope assured him, taking his hand and placing it gently on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby, come summer." The wonder that transformed Rylan's face was something Penelope knew she would remember until her dying day. He gathered her in his arms, his joy too great for words. Later that night, as snow fell silently outside and Rylan slept beside her, Penelope thought of all the twists of fate that had brought her here, the tragic loss of her father, the desperate flight with Abigail, the chance discovery of a solitary cabin, and the good man who lived there. She had been running from outlaws, seeking only survival. Instead, she had found her future, her home, her heart's true destination. As she drifted towards sleep, one hand protectively over her belly, where new life grew, Penelope sent a silent prayer of gratitude to the stars that had guided her path on that fateful day. The danger had long passed, but the love that had blossomed in its shadow would endure for all their days to come. 5 years later, Penelope sat on the expanded porch of what was now known as the Ingram Ranch, watching her husband teach their 4-year-old son, James, named for her father, how to sit properly on his first pony. Beside her, 2-year-old Sarah, named for Rylan's sister, played contentedly with wooden blocks Rylan had carved for her. Abigail, now 23 and engaged to the new doctor in Red River, joined her sister on the porch, bringing fresh lemonade. "They're quite the pair," she remarked, nodding toward Rylan and James. "Like 2 peas in a pod." "Indeed they are," Penelope agreed, smiling as her son's delighted laughter carried across the yard. "James has his father's way with horses already." "And Sarah has your determination," Abigail added, watching the little girl meticulously stack her blocks higher than she had managed before. The Ingram Ranch had flourished beyond their initial hopes. Rylan's gift for training horses had attracted buyers from as far away as California, and Penelope's teaching had expanded to include tutoring the children from outlying ranches who couldn't make the daily trip to town. Sheriff Davis, now retired but still a regular visitor, had once remarked that they had built something truly special, not just a successful business, but a home filled with love and purpose. As Penelope watched her husband lift their son from the pony and swing him high in the air, his strong arms sure and gentle, she thought of how close she had come to losing this life before it had even begun. The memory of those terrifying days fleeing Wade's gang had faded somewhat, but she never took for granted the safety and happiness they had found. That evening, with the children tucked into bed and the ranch quiet under a canopy of stars, Penelope and Rylan walked hand in hand around their property, a ritual they had maintained through the years. "I received a letter from the governor's office today," Rylan mentioned casually. They're considering our proposal for the cavalry contract. That's wonderful news, Penelope replied, squeezing his hand. Your reputation has spread even to Santa Fe. Rylan shrugged modestly. It's our reputation now. None of this would exist without you. Penny. They stopped by the old corral where, years earlier, they had shared their first kiss under similar stars. Rylan wrapped his arms around her from behind, and Penelope leaned into his embrace, savoring the solid strength of him. Do you ever wonder what might have happened if you hadn't stopped to help two terrified women that day? She asked softly. Never, Rylan replied without hesitation. Some things are meant to be, Penny. I believe that now. His lips brushed her temple. You and Abigail running toward my cabin, that wasn't chance. That was providence. Penelope turned in his arms to face him. Though the years had added a few lines around his eyes and touched his dark hair with the faintest hints of silver at the temples, to her, he was more handsome than ever. Experience had deepened the connection between them, creating a bond that strengthened with each passing season. I love you, Rylan Ingram, she said, the words as true now as they had been when first spoken, more with each passing day. And I love you, Penelope Ingram, he replied, his blue eyes reflecting the starlight. You saved me in ways I didn't even know I needed saving. As his lips met hers, tender and familiar, yet still thrilling after all this time, Penelope thought again of the strange, beautiful journey that had brought them here. From tragedy had come joy, from danger, safety, from desperate flight, the most solid of foundations. She had been running for her life, for her sister's life, with no destination in mind beyond survival. Instead, she had found her true home, not in a place, but in a person. In Rylan's arms, in the family they had created, in the life they had built together, stone by stone, day by day. What had begun in fear had transformed into the greatest love story she could have imagined, one written not in the pages of the romance novels she had once favored, but in the quiet moments of a shared life, in children's laughter, in weathered hands working side by side, in kisses exchanged beneath endless New Mexico skies. The danger had passed, but the love endured, stronger than fear, more lasting than danger, as boundless as the western horizon that had once represented only uncertainty, but now symbolized all the beautiful possibilities of their future together.